The wolf never moved. That was the thing people in the village talked about most. Not the size of him, though he was enormous. Not the silver color of his fur, which caught the moonlight in a way that made older residents uncomfortable. It was the stillness. 10 years of stillness, at the edge of the trees, just beyond the low wooden fence of Eleanor Voss's cottage. Children had grown up watching him. Old couples had argued about him over breakfast. The man who delivered Eleanor's post had eventually stopped mentioning it, the way people stop mentioning something that has become too large and too permanent to fit into ordinary conversation. Eleanor herself had made a practice of not looking. She was 34 now. She had a small herbalist practice in the front room of the cottage, 3 bookshelves full of plant medicine texts, and a garden that required her to go outside every single morning. She had learned, over the years, how to face east when she hung the laundry. She had learned to keep her eyes on the kettle, the fence post, the apple tree, anything except the tree line. She told herself this was strength. Most days she almost believed it. It had not always been this way. 10 years ago, Eleanor Voss had been 24 and full of a particular kind of confidence that only comes from not yet knowing what you are capable of losing. She had been a wildlife researcher then, working long days in the Cairngorm Mountains, tracking wolf migration patterns, sleeping in a canvas tent with a thermos of cold coffee and a notebook full of careful observations. She had not believed in much that she could not measure. Then one night, in the 3rd month of her fieldwork, a rival pack cornered her in a ravine. She did not know then what they were. She knew only that she was alone, that it was dark, and that she was very afraid. Callum Draven came out of the trees. What he did in the minutes that followed, she had never been fully able to describe to anyone, partly because the sequence of it happened so quickly, and partly because the moment that stayed with her most was not the danger, or the violence, or even the shock of understanding what he was. It was afterward, when it was over, and she was unharmed, and he stood between her and the dark, his breathing unsteady, his hands at his sides. He had turned to look at her, and she had seen it on his face, plain as anything. He was ashamed, not of what he had done. He was ashamed that she had seen it. He had wanted, desperately, for her not to see that part of him. She had thought about that look almost every day for 10 years. They were together for 3 years. She learned his world slowly, piece by piece, the way you learn the layout of an unfamiliar house. She met his pack, who accepted her with the cautious politeness of people who are waiting to see if a thing will last. She learned the rules and the history, and the weight of what it meant to be Alpha King, a title that sounded like something from a story, until you watched how other people changed when Callum walked into a room. He was not arrogant. That was what surprised her most. He was careful. He listened. He thought before he spoke, and when he made a decision, he lived inside it completely. She had never met anyone so entirely present in every moment he occupied. His wolf recognized her as his mate almost immediately. He kept this from her for a long time, because he was afraid of what it would mean for her. He did not want her to feel claimed. He did not want her to love him out of obligation or destiny rather than choice. He told her eventually, because she asked him directly, and he was constitutionally incapable of lying to her. She had sat with that information for a long time. She had not run from it. She had chosen him again, quietly, deliberately, the same way she chose everything. And then the tribunal happened. The Alpha Council was composed of 7 elders from the oldest packs in Europe, and they had opinions about everything. Their opinion about Eleanor was delivered formally, in a document that Callum brought home on a Tuesday evening and set on the kitchen table, without speaking for almost a full minute. A human mate was a liability. She could be taken. She could be used. Callum's enemies were ancient and creative, and Eleanor was soft and unprotected, in a world that had no patience for softness. The council's position was clear. Callum must either bring her fully into the pack, which meant a permanent change she could never undo, or he must release the bond entirely. She would be kept safe, watched from a distance, but she could not remain in the middle. Callum did not yell. He did not throw the document. He had asked Eleanor to read it, and then he had asked her what she wanted to do. She asked for a week to think. She thought for 2 days. On the 3rd morning, she sat alone at the kitchen table where Callum had placed the document, and she held in her hand a small piece of paper that told her something she had not yet told anyone. She stared at it for a very long time. She was afraid, not of his world, not of the change, not even of the council. She was afraid of herself, of how completely she had let herself need him, of how little of herself she could locate that was not somehow organized around him. She had spent her whole life being careful and self-contained, and she had let him through every wall she had ever built, and sitting at that table she felt suddenly like someone who had given away something she could never get back. She thought, if I stay and it ends, I will not survive it. She thought, I should be the one to leave. She rehearsed what she would say, until she could say it without her voice changing. Then she said it to him. She was not enough for his world. She could not be what was needed. She was sorry. She said every sentence clearly, and she did not look away, and she did not cry until he was gone. She lost the pregnancy 6 weeks later. Alone, in the bathroom of the cottage, early on a Sunday morning. She had never told him it existed. She had never told anyone. She folded that grief up very small, and pressed it somewhere deep and private, and she did not look at it directly for years, the same way she had learned not to look at the tree line. Callum left. He went back to his pack and his duties, and the enormous, unrelenting weight of being responsible for hundreds of lives. By every account she eventually heard, indirectly, through distant sources, he had continued to be exactly who he had always been: thoughtful, steady, present. His wolf did not leave. She had found him at the tree line, 3 days after Callum went away. She had stood at her kitchen window and stared at the silver shape in the trees, and felt something move through her that she had no name for. She had gone outside and stood at the fence and said, very quietly, that he should go, that there was nothing here for him, that it was not fair, to either of them. The wolf had looked at her with amber eyes, and had not moved. In year 4, a letter arrived. There was no greeting. It said only, I am not waiting for you to come back. I am waiting because leaving feels like lying. If you ever want me to go, say so, and I will go. She read it 17 times. She did not reply. She told herself this was kindness. Engaging with it would give him hope she could not justify giving. She told herself this every time she sat down to write a response and then did not. She told herself this so many times that the telling of it began to sound hollow, even inside her own head. But she had become very good at not examining things too closely, and so she folded the letter and put it in a box, and put the box in a cupboard, and did not think about it. She thought about it constantly. The girl appeared on a Tuesday in October, exactly 10 years after Eleanor had said goodbye on a Tuesday in October, which she chose to believe was coincidence. She was 19, and clearly uncomfortable, and she introduced herself as Sorcia, and explained that she was the daughter of a pack elder, and that she was there unofficially, which meant she would deny having come if anyone asked. Eleanor found this so transparently nervous that she liked the girl immediately and made her tea. The message was not from Callum. It was from the council. An arrangement had been made. A match, considered politically sound and personally appropriate. A ceremony was scheduled for 6 weeks' time. The council wanted it noted, Sorcia said, that they bore Eleanor no ill will. They simply felt it was time. Eleanor kept her face very still. Sorcia set down her tea and said, unprompted, that Callum did not know she had come. She also said that the wolf at the tree line had not moved in 3 days, and that a storm was coming from the north, and she found it difficult to understand why someone who could find shelter would choose not to. After the girl left, Eleanor stood in her kitchen for a long time. She thought about the letter she had never answered. She thought about the Sunday morning 10 years ago that she had never spoken of to anyone. She thought about the look on Callum's face in the ravine, the shame, and the care, and the hope that she might not see the worst of him, and how she had seen it, and stayed anyway, at least for a while. She thought about what it means to leave before you can be left, and whether that is wisdom or just fear wearing a practical coat. She put on her boots. She went out the back door. The storm was coming. She could feel it in the cold, the particular pressure of a sky preparing itself. The garden looked washed out and gray. The apple tree had dropped most of its leaves. She walked to the fence, and she looked at the tree line. The wolf stood where he had always stood. He was thinner than she remembered from the last time she had let herself look, which had been perhaps 3 years ago, perhaps 4. His silver fur was matted from the rain that had already started to fall, light and mean, the kind that soaks through slowly. His amber eyes were on her face. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she tried again. She told him about the Sunday morning. She told him she had been 3 weeks along when she came to her decision, and that she had told herself it changed nothing, and that she had been wrong about that, as she had been wrong about several things. She told him that she had convinced herself she was leaving for his sake, because his world needed something she could not provide, but that was not honest, not entirely. And she had spent 10 years being at least mostly honest with herself, and she could not stop now. She told him she had left because she was afraid of needing someone that much. She had thought if she stayed and it ended later, she would be destroyed by it, and leaving first seemed like the only form of control available to her. She understood now that this was not courage. She understood now that she had punished him for something he had not done, and had never shown any sign of doing. She told him she was sorry, not the rehearsed version from 10 years ago, the real one. The rain was heavier now. She was getting wet, and she did not move. The wolf stood still for a long moment. His ears were forward. His amber eyes did not leave her face. And then, for the first time in 10 years, he took a step toward the fence. Eleanor reached down and opened the gate. The storm hit that night. It was the kind that rattles window frames and sends branches down and makes you feel grateful for walls. Eleanor sat inside with the lights on and listened to it, and felt, strangely, quieter than she had in a very long time. In the morning, the tree line was empty. A man sat on her porch steps. He was barefoot, which she thought was very like him, that specific disregard for practical discomfort. He was wearing a gray shirt that was slightly too large, and holding a mug that she recognized as her own, which meant he had let himself in for tea at some point in the early hours. He looked like someone who had not slept in a long time, and had only just now been given permission to try. Eleanor stood in the doorway. He looked up at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then she asked if he wanted breakfast. He said yes. They spent most of the day talking. It was not easy. There were long stretches where one of them would say something, and the other would need to sit with it before responding. There were things she told him that she had never told anyone, and she watched him receive them with the same steadiness that had undone her years ago, that complete willingness to hold something difficult without trying to fix it or put it aside. He told her things too, about the years between, about the weight of the bond on his wolf, which did not understand distance or time or carefully reasoned decisions, which only understood the direction of home. She told him that was an unfair thing to say. He said he knew. Toward evening, she asked him about the arrangement the council had made. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked her what she wanted him to do about it. She looked at him across her kitchen table, this man who had waited 10 years in the rain without being asked to, who had written her one letter, and then respected her silence, even when it cost him something she was only now beginning to understand. She told him she wanted him to stay for dinner. Something shifted in his face. It was small, the way important things sometimes are. He stayed for dinner. Across the village, the baker's wife set down her morning cup and looked out toward the old stone cottage at the edge of town. She had grown so used to the shape of the wolf at the tree line that its absence felt like a missing tooth. "He's gone," she said to her husband. Her husband did not look up from his newspaper. Maybe he found what he was after. She watched the warm light in the cottage window a moment longer. 2 figures moved inside, slow and unhurried, with the ease of people who have finally stopped bracing for something. "Maybe," she said, and let the curtain fall.